the many other farm hamlets that would soon be sprinkled over the military tract, mid-19th century farms here ranged in size from very small subsistence operations to larger ones like Isaac Craddock's. In 1817, Craddock built this handsome Greek Revival home, which was enlarged by a new owner, Peter Klein, in 1860. Families like the Kleins produced food, including meat for themselves, but for the local market as well. Meat from pigs, wool from sheep, milk from cows. You know the house in its present location at 172 Pleasant Grove Road, to which it was moved by Cornell in 2000, when preservationists at Historic Ithaca brought to light its architectural significance. In her diary, 13-year-old Carrie Manning chronicled the life she lived during the year 1869 on the prosperous T. Manning Farm on the east side of North Traphammer Road, near present-day Winthrop Drive, Randolph Road, and Warwick Place. Carrie was the daughter of Thompson Manning, born in 1822, whose father, Isaac Manning, had cleared the land. She wrote about helping her mother with quilting, sewing, and cooking, while her father grew rye, wheat, oats, corn, and buckwheat that he took by wagon downhill to mills powered by the water flowing in Fall Creek and Cascadilla Creek for grinding. That, of course, is how Ithaca down below and on the flats and near the inlet initiated as being a commercial center of our area, and because of the transportation. My children were fortunate to read Carrie Manning's diary at the Northeast and Cayuga Heights elementary schools. I believe in Carol Levitsky and the late Susan DeWinter's fourth grades. Carrie was taught to write at the two-room district schoolhouse just down the road from home. You can see it from the back window, it's right there. From home in lessons shared with other farm children, given by their teacher, a Miss Phillips, whom Carrie thought first rate. Established in 1823 as District School 22 and shown as Schoolhouse Number 6 on an 1866 county map, this was the first school in Cayuga Heights. The little community it served simply called it the Klein Schoolhouse because of the location on the wedge-shaped property where what at the time was part of Klein, now Pleasant Grove Road, and Hanshaw Roads meet. Patients at the dental practice of Dr. Patrick, current owner of the house with his wife, get to admire the old school bell on the front porch when they arrive for appointments. There are two entrances shown on this side of the building, one for girls and one for boys. And yes, there was and still is an outhouse out back. The 1858 diary of another teacher, Isaac Owen Manning, who was a cousin of Carrie's, attended the Ithaca Academy downtown and received a certificate from its Associated Teachers Institute. He had notes about teaching a class at the school with as many as 34 scholars. Sadly, Carrie Manning died only 6 years after she kept her diary, on January 1st, 1875, a month after her 18th birthday. She was buried just up the road from her school in Pleasant Grove Cemetery, where her father erected a headstone when her mother, Caroline Drake Manning, died 6 years later. Inspired by a program held at the History Center in Tompkins County at the 8th Square Schoolhouse in Dryden during the summer of 2015, I think they talked to Pat, local fifth graders, Olivia Turk and Naya Shell, succeeded in finding the headstone under a tall evergreen. It had been looked for previously many times over the course of many years without success. Carrie's family stayed on near the corners until 1903, when her widowed father, having remarried, sold the family farm and moved to Long Island. For several decades, the former Thompson Manning farm was known as the Cornell Taylor Farm, until, like its neighbors, it was subdivided for property development in Cayuga Heights. By the time the suburban development began, along with the names of the Cayuga tribe and the Iroquois Confederacy, the names of only two families On Pat's 1866 map, the Hanshaws and the Kleins were preserved on the green and white street signs at corners of village roadways, of which we have 21 miles. And the farm road named for the Mannings, pictured here in a photo taken by Dorothy Cornell when she built this house in 1928, has completely disappeared. Well, who am I to say so, but I do wish that when the area was developed up the road, instead of Texas Lane and other names, the Mannings and the early farm families' names had been invoked, but this was not valued or a priority at the time. Apart from their graves in Pleasant Grove Cemetery, memories of the other pioneer farm families Carrie mentioned often in her diary, like the Bushes, whose house built in 1825 at 309 East Upland Road has continued down to the present as a family home, and the LaBar family have all but faded away. In the intervening years, unlike other villages, like Trumansburg, that grew out of such hamlets in the military tract of central New York, the incorporated village of Cayuga Heights would take shape first, much closer to Cornell, for we are a university suburb, and that's the story I look forward to telling further. Farming carried on in this area well into the 20th century. In this section, yes, but the second half of the backstory of Cayuga Heights goes further west and south near the edge of Fall Creek Gorge. This part of Cayuga Heights, near the gorge, would evolve into something very different, a university suburb founded in response to a demand for faculty housing. And that's what I have to say. Some questions, but Pat has prepared for you what you have seen, this beautiful printout of the 19th century farmhouses, and I would really like for her to have a few minutes to tell you about them.
I just wanted to mention that there was a LaBar family on Hillcrest Road, like in Lansing, and that old house had been in that family for many years. And Betty LaBar died about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and Al LaBar is still alive. So it kind of caught my eye when I saw it.
And it was on what road?
Hillcrest.
Oh, out in Lansing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So they're probably all related through the years.
And that was an old house?
Oh, beautiful old house in Hillcrest, yeah.
Do you know about the house?
Oh, yes, I have a big
Louise,
file on the bar.
Let me
Oh,
introduce.
hi.
So if you want to know more about the bar,
Yeah, I know that they sold that house, and Betty said that was the most difficult thing she ever had to do.
because it had always been in the family.
Yeah.
And a wide plant source.
Oh, golly, yes. I
She
love
took
it.
such good care of it.
This is our historian colleague in Lansing, Louise Bement. So the Hanshaws recycle in the history of Cayuga Heights as we take it forward. Rachel Hanshaw was the town clerk when the annexation took place, but that rushes ahead. Pat, won't you?
Yes, thank you, Bea. I think Bea has provided this wonderful overview of 200 years of history, and I just wanted to look at some of there are about 14 extant 19th century farmhouses in the village of Cayuga Heights. I would stand up, but I'm this nest of cords here, and I'm afraid to knock something out, and we won't be able to see these. So I walk around the neighborhood a lot, and Lee, you do too, and I started noticing the stone foundations. And I said, oh, that must be a farmhouse. So Randy Kepex and Carol Shipman started this project, and they put together this enormous database of every single home in Cayuga Heights, and then they had started filling in data, when houses were built, previous owners, if there was some kind of interesting resident like Nabokov lived in how many homes in Cayuga Heights? Six homes in Cayuga Heights. There were a number of Manhattan Project physicists who lived in Cayuga Heights, so they have mapped all these out. So this is kind of my attempt to map out the 19th century farmhouses in Cayuga Heights. So I chose about a dozen here that I wanted to look at a little bit. And I'm going to have to use my notes because unlike Louise, I don't have it in my head. So we talked about the Craddock family, And they were indeed a very big deal in the 19th century. Benjamin Craddock and Catherine Risley Craddock, they were from Wallkill, New York. They came to Tompkins County in about 1810. Bruce Britton is here. He's the historian of Forest Home, and he gave me some information yesterday that was really helpful. The Craddocks bought 500 acres in Military Lot 92, which makes up the bulk of Forest Home, so that's south of us. So that was in 1810. And then Benjamin Craddock established a sawmill on Fall Creek in Forest Home. So he must have used that enormous amount of land that he had, cleared the timber, and then used it in the sawmill. His son Isaac Craddock, who reportedly built this house, he founded a lumber mill on Fall Creek. Let me show you here. First of all, here's you can see Military Lot 92 right here, and 90. So Cayuga Heights has a portion of 90, and you can see the Craddocks here. And is that 93, Bruce? Military Lot 93 over there, where Craddocks are? Maybe. And this is a picture of a mill, and Bruce, I don't know if you know, but it said wool mill on the back. I found this at the History Center. So the Isaac Craddock's turning mill was, I think there was some bankruptcy involved. It was turned over in 1893 to the Wool family. So this is probably not what it looked like. I'm sure these things were destroyed. Bruce says so in his history of Forest Home, but this is kind of, deciding of what it might have looked like. So also to give you an indication of how wealthy this family was. So after, Catherine died in 1821, Benjamin died in 1823. When he died, he left 500 acres to his 5 sons, and his 5 daughters received cows and sheep and furniture, and also about $2,000 in cash, which my husband, the mathematician, helped me figure out was about the equivalent of over $1 million, 2014 dollars. So very big deal, this family, and I think we're very lucky to have that. The historic Ithaca has preserved the Craddock Morehouse for us. We've talked about Carrie Manning and the Manning families. The Mannings were from New Jersey, and there were so many Mannings. If you look at the property deeds at the county clerk's office, there are just pages and pages of Mannings all over Tompkins County transferring property. We have at least 3 Manning farmhouses that are extant in the village, and I'll try to go into a little bit about who they were. So unfortunately, Carrie Manning's farmhouse is no longer standing, which is sad. But somebody had mentioned the LaBar farmhouse in Lansing. This is what is known locally as the Manning LaBar farmhouse, and it's on Kendall Ithaca property. We have a current owner who's living in the home right now. The Craddock Morehouse was built in 1817, and I've heard that's the oldest house in Cayuga Heights, but I don't know. I mean, this might qualify. Carol Sisler has put the built date between 1810 and 1829, and what I've gone back to do, I've looked at these old maps. I don't know if you've looked at some of these old maps for Tompkins County. If you zoom in, they actually have the property owner names, and that's a fantastic resource if you can figure out, if you can kind of reference where these places are. So this was built by Lydia and Richard Manning. Oh, I don't know if it was built by, let me just say that they bought this property that the house is on in 1811. So it's this could have been their house. We don't know because deeds do not tell you when a house was built, at least in the 19th century. So you kind of have to make some guesses. So this Richard and Lydia Manning owned land all over Military Lot 89. but this, the property that this house was on was considered their homestead. So this was where they lived. Richard Manning died in 1827, and his, according to a deed, his debts exceeded his cash. So the executors had to sell a lot of the property. Fortunately, though, Lydia, and this is interesting, I hadn't known this, she had dower rights to this homestead lot, so she was able to live, continue to live on the property. And then you can see this is an 1853 map of Tompkins County. You can see D. Van Manning, that's Daniel Van Manning, that's Richard and Lydia's son. And he's also on the 1866 map. So I don't know where the LeBar comes from yet. I haven't found the deeds yet for which LeBars were there.
That's the old farmhouse on the Kendall
Exactly
property.
right.
And until just a couple months ago, Roger and Harriet Crampton lived in that house.
Okay.
You know them.
And David and Rachel Ye lived there.
But I just met the current owner, who just
Well,
moved in.
not owner,
Oh,
Kendall owner.
resident, sorry, sorry.
Resident. yeah.
Right.
The name Van Manning is interesting. Was that a middle name, or was
That was
it
his middle
taking
name.
on airs?
So, I'm trying, I don't know. It's a good question.
I think there was a van, I've been fooling with it, I think there was a van as a surname somewhere.
That's what I was gonna say, I thought I'd seen something like that. There's at least Vaughn, I don't know if it was
Yeah.
Van, so.
I think Mary's too English for Van Manning.
Dutch.
Let's see, have people here read Carrie Manning's diary? I really urge you to do so. There are just so many beautiful details. I mean, first of all, you don't get kids' voices in history much. So, you know, she talks about just her daily life, so that's wonderful. But she also talks about the farm families in this area. So she will talk about her father went over to Mr. LeBar's house pretty much every evening. I don't know what they did, but he went over, they chatted. So I think this is the LeBar farmhouse that Carrie Manning talks about in her diary. So Richard and Lydia Manning owned this lot, and then in 1845, there's a deed from Lydia to her daughter Amanda LeBar and her son-in-law Elijah LeBar. And it's kind of a strange deed. It's in exchange for $300. You know, they live in the house or they live on the property, and then they give her sort of an annuity of $20 a year. And I found another deed that I guess kind of renewed whatever this agreement was. This was much later. So we've had this constant debate on the history team about which of the houses, where did Carrie live, you know, who is she talking about in the diary. So at least for now, I think this is one of her family friends. Oh, and I also wanted to mention, Bea mentioned Rachel Hanshaw was the town of Ithaca clerk.
Yes.
And the vote,
It took place, she was the town clerk, and the town had to give approval to the petitioners who asked to join the village of Cayuga Heights. It started in 1952, took place in 1953. It was December 29th in 1952 that they met in Rachel's house. It was a very cold and snowy and windy day, but they persevered and they came. And the town board gathered and they voted to approve this withdrawal from the town into the village of Cayuga Heights of what is today roughly 3/4 of the village of Cayuga Heights. I think most of you know where that is. And so that was quite an event. The town apparently felt they wanted to get rid of what at the time was a water district. It was called the Cayuga Heights Water District. It surrounded the village, and I think they didn't want to bother with it. But the Cayuga Heights Village Board, the mayor at the time was a guy named Shirey, they were willing to take it on. And it was 3 men who lived in the village, Walter Heasley, Dr. Herbert Ensworth, and a chap named Foster, about whom I don't yet know very much. And they initiated this petition process. Walter Heasley, of course, owned Community Corners across the street and was about to move from out on Warren Road to the parkways. There was a little enlightened self-interest in this on his part, but that's how everything has happened here. No apologies needed. But in any case, Rachel's house is terribly important. And the current owners, I'm trying not to name current owners today because that's the way we try to approach this. They would not apparently, and I wouldn't blame them, be terribly interested, but the house could very well be on the historic register by its merit.
Go ahead.
Was there ever a trip hammer on Trip Hammer Road, say by Cornell University?
Yes, at Cornell, and Bruce can probably tell you all about that. Do you want to speak to that?
Just, my understanding is there was a trip hammer at Trip Hammer Falls, just a large water-driven blacksmithing hammer.
So this is gorgeous, gorgeous 1870s farmhouse. At least the assessment deeds say it's built in 1870. I don't know, I'm a little skeptical. It seems a little older, but it's hard to tell. So this was also the property of one of the Manning families. This was owned by Hannah and Abraham Manning. And I have not, if anybody knows, Louise, maybe you can tell us about, I have not been able to figure out how this Manning family was connected to the red brick farmhouse Mannings, Richard and Lydia Manning over here. But if you look at Kendall and Ithaca property right now, so you have this yellow house on, it's not within Kendall, it's a private home. But that would have been part of this huge expanse that was, you know, like this collective Manning farm. So it would have been this house, the red brick house on Kendall property, and what was the other one? Oh, this is the Rachel Hanshaw house here. So I think they must have been related, but I haven't been able to track down that yet.
Not quite a family compound.
And this is kind of exciting, you know, I'm doing this research, doing a lot of deeds, and Randy and Carol are helping me out, but sometimes it's just somebody in the community who says, oh, I know a little bit about that house, and I just got some information today about just the, sort of like the Manning farm road. There was a farm road that ran beside the house, and there was a stone bridge over a little creek back there, and I believe there was a big barn behind there that's now Kendall property. So this is the Klein farmhouse. So we have Kleinwoods Road. The Kleins are originally from New Jersey. They came here in about 1817. They bought, I've done some very rough deed mapping on Google Maps. And this lot that they bought here, they bought from the Craddock, Benjamin Craddock died in 1823, as I said. They bought this property from the Craddocks. So 1823, and then the house was built in 1829. And you can see, I talked about the Richard and Lydia Manning farm that was just north of the Klein farm. And this farm family I had not heard of before, John and Elizabeth Sharp, but they owned this property that would become the Bush farm. I don't know if you've heard of the Bush farmhouse, but that's where that is today. And finally, Hanshaw Road. Why do we have Hanshaw Road? I don't know where the Hanshaws came from, but James Hanshaw, he's on this 1853 map, he purchased this property in 1830, and you can see the outlines of the property. It included Ned's Pizza. So it ran north of Hanshaw Road up to Texas Lane and then down Pleasant Grove Road. Let's see, so he, this is, I don't know if you know this house. If you go south on Hanshaw, it's on the right, just past the dentist's office that was the schoolhouse. Little 1,300 square foot house, and he had a big family. I don't know how they all fit in there. But so he owned the property from 1830 until 1871, and I see this house was built in 1870. So again, I see 1870 on the assessment records for these older homes, and I'm thinking that was just kind of a placeholder, so this may be older.
You say it's just past the schoolhouse?
Yeah, if you're going out south on Hanshaw Road, it's on the right, and it's just east of the country club property, and somebody's been fixing it up the last few
Yes.
years, I don't know what.
It's down a little in the dell, isn't it?
It's pretty close to the road. Just the Bush, somebody mentioned the Bush family, no, I guess it was the Lavars. The Bush family, they came from Pennsylvania, and it was John and Jane Bush, and they came in about 1804, and all their children came with them. As I said, these families, when they came from New Jersey and Pennsylvania, they came in big groups, which makes sense if you're going to settle on a big farm. You want a lot of labor to help you clear that farm. Let's see, so this was built in 1825, and I'm sure everybody has passed this house, and because it's very conspicuous. So the awning, it's on East Upland Road as you're heading up here towards Marcham Hall. Let's see, so I don't know if I have too many details about this, but the I think it's Charles S. Bush was the original owner. Let's see, no, it was a Sharp family farm, and then it was sold to Charles S. Bush, and I believe he was on the property when the house was built in 1825. And this is kind of my favorite one. Love this photograph. This is in the old village of Cayuga Heights. It's on the Parkway, 111 the Parkway, near Parkway Place and White Park Road. It's on White Park Road, essentially. So the current owner of the house, I had asked her about whether she knew, I'd seen the 1834 construction date of the home, and I asked her if she knew about the history of the home. And she didn't have much information other than that she'd heard from the previous owners that it had been a sheep farm. And the previous owners still live in the village. They stopped by and gave her this photograph. And it was actually, there's another house I think you can barely see. Her neighbor, I think, was at the History Center archives and researching his house history, and he saw this photograph and said, that is the house next door. And I believe it is. It's interesting, you can see, did somebody see the steeple in the background?
Yeah.
I think that may be the Pleasant Grove Chapel steeple. So this photograph would have been taken from pretty high up, and you can see the house, and it looks, this has got to be this house.
Do you know what direction?
So this would be, up here would be the Parkway Place,
This
where
is Cornell, this way.
so
You're
Cornell would
coming
be
down
this
the
way.
Parkway.
Yeah, there you go. So that would be looking east.
So that's a shadow on the bottom, right?
Well, I'm not sure what that,
It's a house shadow. We're standing on a house roof taking that picture.
Yeah.
See the chimneys.
oh, I see, yeah.
Well done, Bruce.
We're waving.
Okay. So this is just kind of a little bit of an agenda slide because I would like for you to research your house history and tell me what you know about it. So that's all I have. Thank you.